Welcome the anointed ones. The smartest move you'll ever make is realizing some games aren't worth playing. Chosen ones, let's be brutally honest. When you refuse to play their little chess matches of manipulation, gossip, and fake power plays, you didn't just walk away, you turned their entire scoreboard into toilet paper, and here's the kicker. According to psychology studies, nothing bruises the human ego more than being ignored by the very person they tried to control. That's why these people aren't just bitter, they're feeling dumb as F***K. Think about it, they built strategies, set traps and rehearsed monologues like villains in a B movie, only for you to shrug, yawn and say, "Nah, I'm good." That's like showing up to a boxing match only to find out the other fighter went home to binge watch Netflix. Now they're swinging at air, looking ridiculous, and the crowd is laughing. And here's where it gets spicy. You didn't just reject the games, you exposed them. Every scheme they pulled only highlighted their desperation. Every lie they spun only revealed how hollow they were. And while they're out there sulking, scratching their heads and throwing tantrums, you're over here unbothered, sipping your peace like it's a 5-star cocktail. This isn't just about walking away. It's about what walking away did to them. You rewired the entire dynamic. You didn't beat them at their game, and you made the game itself irrelevant. And that's the kind of humiliation that keeps people up at night staring at the ceiling, wondering how the hell they got outsmarted by someone who didn't even bother to play. So buckle up, because we're about to break down 14 extraordinary truths about why your refusal to engage left them bitter, humiliated, and exposed. And why the smartest thing you ever did was wanting no part of their circus. Number 1, they mistook your disinterest for weakness, then realized it was power. They mistook your disinterest for weakness, then realized it was power. That's the part that eats them alive. At first, they thought your refusal to engage meant you were scared, intimidated, or simply not sharp enough to keep up. They assumed you were bowing out because you couldn't handle the pressure of their games. But when the dust settled, it became painfully clear. You weren't avoiding their battles out of fear. You were ignoring them because they weren't even worth your time. And that realization hit them harder than any direct confrontation ever could. Here's the thing. People who thrive on games rely on your participation. They need your energy, your reactions, your defenses, your counterattacks. That's the fuel that keeps their little fires burning. When you stayed disinterested, you didn't just deny them fuel, you exposed how weak their entire system was without it. Suddenly their elaborate strategies looked like nothing more than wasted effort. Every trap they set was just a hole in the ground that they themselves ended up staring into. The real sting isn't that you walked away, it's that you walked away without loss. While they were obsessing over how to outmaneuver you, you were focusing on building a life outside of their drama. They stayed stuck in cycles of manipulation while you built peace, resilience, and clarity. That's where the bitterness grows, from realizing that all their effort left them with nothing, while your refusal left you stronger. Disinterest is a form of power most people underestimate. It strips manipulators of the stage they crave. It denies them the satisfaction of validation, whether through victory or even through conflict. And when they see you not just survive, but actually thrive without their games, it forces them to face a brutal truth. They needed you far more than you ever needed them. That's the humiliation they can't shake off. At the end of the day, they didn't just miscalculate your moves, they miscalculated your entire mindset. They expected resistance, they expected retaliation. What they didn't expect was for you to look at their game board and realize it had no value to begin with. That's when their confidence crumbled. Your disinterest exposed their powerlessness, and the deeper they think about it, the dumber they feel. Number 2, their entire identity depended on outsmarting you. Their entire identity depended on outsmarting you, and that's exactly why they feel so foolish now. From the very beginning, they positioned themselves in secret competition with you. Every move they made, every word they spoke, every scheme they designed was built around the goal of proving themselves smarter, sharper, and more calculating than you. It wasn't about living their own life or pursuing their own goals. It was about making sure you never got the upper hand. That obsession became their identity. The problem is, when someone builds their sense of self around defeating another person, their entire existence becomes fragile. They tie their worth to whether or not they can one-up you. They study your steps, mimic your style, and watch you with the intensity of someone preparing for battle. But when you refuse to play the game, when you step out of the ring altogether, all of their preparation becomes useless. They have nothing left to define themselves by. That emptiness is where the bitterness festers. What stings even more is that you never asked for this rivalry. You weren't trying to outsmart them, you weren't competing. You were simply being yourself, moving in your own lane, building in your own silence. And yet, to them, everything you did was a challenge, everything you achieved was a threat. When you showed no interest in competing, they realized they had wasted years shadowboxing with someone who wasn't even fighting back. That's humiliation at its core. It's also why they can't let it go. To admit you're not interested is to admit that all of their clever tactics and manipulations were pointless. To admit that you never considered them an opponent is to admit that their entire self-image is built on air. That's a hard pill to swallow because it forces them to face the truth. They weren't outsmarting you. They were entertaining themselves with an illusion. This is why your presence is so unsettling to them even now. You represent a mirror they can't avoid, one that shows them how small their victories really were. They tried to build an identity around being the puppet master, but without your participation, they're just someone pulling strings in an empty room. That's not power, that's desperation, and that's why they feel so painfully stupid. Number 3. You revealed how shallow their intelligence really is. They thought manipulation was the highest form of intelligence, and that's exactly why they feel exposed now. For years they believed that tricking people, twisting narratives and bending morals to get what they wanted was proof that they were smarter than everyone else. In their world, being sneaky equaled being superior. They looked at honesty as weakness, and they saw integrity as something to laugh at. But when you stepped into the picture and refused to bow to their games, the truth hit them hard. Their so-called brilliance was nothing more than shallow cunning. Real intelligence shows itself in the ability to build, to grow, to elevate not just yourself but others around you. Manipulation doesn't build anything, it only tears down. It leaves destruction, mistrust, and emptiness in its wake. They thought they were being clever, but when you walked away and still managed to stand stronger, happier, and freer than them, their illusion of superiority collapsed. Suddenly, all those years of scheming looked childish. All those lies and half-truths looked pathetic compared to the stability of someone who never needed them in the first place. The part that bites is that manipulation only works on people who need validation from manipulators. You didn't. And that's where the humiliation came in. When they tried to gaslight you, you saw straight through it. When they tried to use guilt or pressure, you refused to bend. That kind of resistance forced them to realize that their so-called intelligence has limits. And those limits are glaring when faced with someone who thinks beyond surface-level tricks. What makes it worse is how obvious their weakness becomes once the mask of cleverness is pulled off. Everyone can see it. People who once believed in their sharpness start noticing the cracks, the failed attempts, the exposed lies. And while they're scrambling to maintain the image of being the smartest person in the room, you've already proven that true intelligence doesn't require control. It requires freedom. That's the bitter truth they choke on. Manipulation can make someone look powerful for a season, but it never lasts. When faced with someone grounded in truth, manipulation looks like cheap theater. And the moment they realize their entire playbook was useless against you, their intelligence instantly shriveled into embarrassment. That's why they feel so dumb. It's because deep down they finally see they never were as smart as they thought. Number 4, you force them to confront that they're entertaining themselves, not winning anything. They were convinced they were winning, convinced that every move, every manipulation, every bit of gossip was taking them closer to some ultimate victory. They built their lives around strategies meant to outshine, outmaneuver, and outplay. To them, the games they played were serious, high-stakes battles, but you, by stepping away and refusing to engage, forced them to face a truth they couldn't escape. The scoreboard they were so obsessed with was completely imaginary. All those hours spent calculating, planning, and scheming didn't bring them any real advantage. They weren't earning respect, loyalty, or influence. They were only spinning in a circle of their own making, congratulating themselves for victories that didn't exist outside their heads. And when you walked away, The contrast became undeniable. You didn't need validation, you didn't need recognition, and you certainly didn't need to prove yourself in their petty little contests. Your freedom exposed the hollowness of their entire world. What makes it even more humiliating for them is that they can't argue with it. You didn't confront them, call them out, or retaliate. You simply moved on. Their years of effort, their carefully constructed narratives, and all the energy they spent trying to manipulate outcomes evaporated because you weren't there to make the games meaningful. Suddenly they see that all the supposed victories were nothing more than entertainment for themselves. They were applauding their own performance while missing that the audience that mattered was never paying attention. And that realization stings, because it's not just about losing. It's about wasted life. All that obsession, all that stress, all that strategy, and for what? No actual prize, no real gain, just bruised egos and a growing awareness that they spent their time and energy chasing illusions. Meanwhile, you've been living untouched by the drama, building something real, solid, and untouchable. The contrast is unbearable to them. They see it, and there's nothing they can do to erase it. By refusing to participate, you didn't just walk away, you forced them to confront the emptiness of their own games. And that confrontation is brutal. It's the moment they finally understand that they've been entertaining themselves all along, and the audience they thought they were impressing, the people who truly mattered, was never invested in the first place. That's why they're bitter, frustrated, and at their core feeling dumb as hell. And number 5. They can't process why your peace outshines their victories. They can't process why your peace outshines their victories. They've spent years collecting achievements, allies, and accolades, meticulously crafting an image of superiority. Every promotion, every recognition, every nod from the right people was supposed to prove that they were on top, untouchable, and cleverer than everyone around them. They've built a life that screams success, and yet, no matter how high they climb or how loud they celebrate, it doesn't create what you already have effortlessly: calm authority. Your peace isn't something you earn or display, it's a presence. It doesn't need validation, applause, or acknowledgement. It simply exists, and it carries weight without force. That's the part they can't understand. They see all their trophies, their alliances, their visible signs of power, and they think that should be enough to make them feel superior. But when they encounter someone whose inner strength and serenity outshine all that effort, it's not just frustrating, it's humiliating. Their victories suddenly look shallow because they're external, loud, and conditional, while your authority is internal, quiet, and absolute. The harsh truth they have to confront is that dominance isn't measured by accumulation or manipulation. Your power comes from self-possession, from clarity, from the ability to move through life without being rattled by petty tactics or hollow validation. And that's why they feel dumb. They've worked tirelessly to achieve things that, while impressive on the surface, don't give them the real influence or the unshakable calm you embody naturally. They thought winning meant controlling outcomes, impressing others, or stacking accolades, but none of that can manufacture what you carry inside. Every time they compare themselves to you, it's a silent defeat. Not because you confronted them, outmaneuvered them, or won in any measurable way, but because you didn't have to. You never needed to prove anything. You never needed to fight for acknowledgement. Your life and your peace do all the talking, and that contrast exposes their effort for what it really is: loud, performative, and ultimately hollow. That's why their confusion turns into bitterness. They can't process the reality that true strength isn't about victory over others, it's about mastery over oneself, and you've already claimed it effortlessly. Number 6, you turned their secrets into self-incrimination without saying a word. Every scheme they tried to pull on you ended up revealing far more about them than it ever did about you. They spent time plotting, manipulating, and twisting situations to their advantage, thinking they were controlling the narrative. But by refusing to stoop to their level, by holding fast to your own integrity, you created a mirror they couldn't avoid. Every lie, every half-truth, every attempt to manipulate was caught in the light of your authenticity. And in that light, their flaws, selfishness, and desperation became impossible to hide. You didn't need to call them out, argue, or fight. Your mere presence and consistency exposed them. They were trying to entangle you, but instead, they entangled themselves. Every move they made intended to undermine or trap you acted like a confession about who they really are. Their words, their actions, and even their silences began to work against them. What they thought were clever schemes became evidence of their insecurities, their manipulations, and their moral compromises. The brilliance of this is that it wasn't your effort that humiliated them. It was their own choices. By holding on to honesty, calm, and focus, you turned them into their own witness. They became the source of their own downfall, showing everyone around them what they tried to hide from themselves. The more they schemed, the more visible their character flaws became, and the more everyone could see the contrast between your integrity and their duplicity. This kind of exposure is permanent. Once someone's manipulations and true nature are revealed, it's impossible to erase the impression. People remember the moments when intentions were clear, when deceit was unmasked by someone who refused to participate in the charade. And the crushing part for them is that you didn't even have to do anything dramatic. You didn't need confrontation or theatrics. You just existed with unwavering integrity, and that alone illuminated their shadows. In the end, they are left to wrestle with the consequences of their own actions, publicly and privately. Their secrets, which they believed would give them control, instead cemented their humiliation. And you, by staying true to yourself, became the silent force that turned every attempt to harm or manipulate you into undeniable proof of their own flaws. That kind of self-incrimination, born from integrity alone, leaves a mark that can't be ignored, rewritten, or forgotten. Number 7. You proved that manipulation requires a willing victim. They spent years assuming that everyone could be twisted, bent, or maneuvered to fit their schemes, and they counted on you being no different. Every lie, every bit of gaslighting, every attempt to triangulate and control depended entirely on your participation. Without someone to react, to defend, to worry, or to falter, their manipulations have nothing to feed on. You didn't just refuse to play, you pulled yourself out of the system that gives their games power. And that's what drives them insane. Manipulation only works when the target is vulnerable, unaware, or desperate for validation. They relied on you being distracted, reactive, or emotionally invested. They never considered that someone could see through the entire structure and remain untouched by it. By refusing to engage, you exposed the entire strategy as fragile and meaningless. Every tactic they thought was genius became obvious, pointless, and even laughable. Their sense of control evaporated because you didn't hand it to them, and that's a truth that cuts deeper than confrontation ever could. The bitterest part for them is that your awareness wasn't flashy or aggressive. You didn't need to call them out or fight back. You simply observed, stayed grounded, and refused to participate in the chaos. That simple act showed them the harsh reality. Their schemes only function when someone allows them to function. Without a willing victim, the manipulator is powerless, and suddenly the years they spent planning, scheming, and trying to outsmart you look foolish. Their frustration isn't just about losing control. It's about being exposed as dependent on others' ignorance. They can't understand how someone could move through their traps with calm and clarity, because that's never happened before. Their cleverness was meant to dominate and confuse, but your refusal proved that intelligence without awareness is nothing more than a theatrical display. By refusing to be drawn in, you rewrote the rules of engagement. You became proof that manipulation isn't about skill, it's about access. The moment they realized their strategies had no power over you, they were forced to confront a humiliating truth. They overestimated themselves, underestimated your awareness, and mistook compliance for inevitability. That's why they feel dumb. They've been operating under the illusion of mastery, only to discover their whole system collapses when the target simply refuses to play. Number 8, you redefined the rules without lifting a finger. They spent countless hours setting up traps, crafting illusions, and building invisible walls meant to contain, control, and confuse you. Every obstacle was designed to force you into their terms, to make you play by their rules, to give them the satisfaction of feeling superior. They believed that if they carefully engineered the game, they could predict your every move. What they didn't account for was that you weren't playing at all. You weren't maneuvering within their constraints. You simply existed outside of them, untouched and unbound. The crushing part for them is the realization that all their effort was wasted. Every wall they built, every intricate plot they layered was powerless because you refused to acknowledge the rules. They thought they were controlling the narrative, but you were writing your own story entirely. And because you didn't react, didn't engage, and didn't conform, their entire strategy dissolved into irrelevance. It's one thing to lose a battle. It's another to watch the battlefield itself vanish beneath your feet. This isn't about cleverness or cunning on your part. You didn't need to plot, counter, or fight. You simply refused to be trapped. And that refusal reshaped the playing field. Their traps were designed to create tension, force reactions, and manipulate outcomes. But when no reaction came, the power dynamic shifted instantly. Their hours of scheming became evidence of their wasted energy, not of your struggle. And what's worse for them is that this isn't something they can fix. They can't rebuild the maze because the entire game was rendered meaningless by your very presence and clarity. Every plan they thought was foolproof now looks childish. Every effort to corner you now seems absurd. They are left standing in the ruins of their own making, forced to confront that the rules they counted on controlling were never real. They only existed for those willing to play. You didn't beat them, and that's the real humiliation. You didn't just outmaneuver them, you made the game itself irrelevant. They feel dumb because they dedicated so much time and energy to a battle that didn't matter to you at all. Their power was never yours to fight, it was theirs to surrender, and by refusing to play, you did it for them without saying a word. Number 9, you made them realize they were chasing shadows while you built substance. They spent so much time obsessed with appearances, optics, and perception that they forgot what real substance looks like. Every move they made, every word they spoke, every relationship they cultivated was designed to look impressive to others, to signal power, influence, or superiority. They mastered the art of looking like they had it all together, projecting an image of control and accomplishment. But all of that is fragile. It exists only on the surface, easily shattered by reality or insight. Meanwhile, you were building something far stronger. While they were focused on how things looked, you were focused on how things actually were. You invested in growth that couldn't be faked, in wisdom that couldn't be borrowed, in depth that couldn't be imitated. Every challenge you faced, every moment of struggle or reflection strengthened something inside you that no manipulation or optics could touch. Your foundation wasn't dependent on recognition or approval. It was real, tangible, and permanent. The blow to them comes from the contrast. They can fake power, influence, and intelligence, but you carry something they cannot manufacture, authenticity. They see it now, whether they admit it or not. They see that their carefully constructed facades crumble when faced with a presence that is grounded, unshakable, and genuine. Their tricks, strategies, and self-promotion suddenly feel shallow, flimsy, and meaningless next to the quiet, undeniable strength you exude. That's why they feel dumb. They realize that while they were busy performing, you were building reality. While they were chasing shadows, status, appearances, manipulation, you were cultivating substance that can't be copied or stolen. Every attempt they made to impress, intimidate, or manipulate falls flat in comparison to the depth of someone who operates from integrity and understanding. They thought power was about perception, but you taught them otherwise without saying a word. Power, real power, comes from what you carry inside, from the truth of who you are, and from the growth you achieve without seeking anyone's approval. Their bitterness stems from the fact that they cannot fake this, cannot shortcut it, and cannot undo the gap you created. They are left chasing shadows while you move freely in a reality they can't reach, and that realization is crushing in the most humiliating way possible. Number 10, your detachment made their obsession look insane. Their obsession became painfully obvious the moment you stopped caring. They've been consumed by watching, comparing, and competing, convinced that their every move would provoke a reaction, gain attention, or force a response. They built narratives, spun stories, and orchestrated situations expecting you to engage, expecting that your focus on them would validate their effort. But you didn't. You detached. You moved beyond their cycles of manipulation and drama, leaving them grasping at shadows that no longer existed. That asymmetry is what makes them look foolish. One side is frantic, hyper-focused, and emotionally invested, while the other moves with ease, calm, and indifference. They can't comprehend how someone could be so unaffected, so free, and yet so aware. Every attempt to draw you in or provoke you only highlights their immaturity and desperation. Their obsession, once hidden under pretense and calculated moves, now looks irrational and extreme because it exists entirely without reciprocation. The humiliation comes from realizing that their efforts don't matter. All their scheming, comparing, and strategizing was designed to control, intimidate, or impress, and yet none of it produced the desired outcome. Meanwhile, your liberation becomes a mirror showing them the absurdity of their obsession. You don't need to confront them to win. You simply exist beyond the scope of their influence, and that absence of engagement cuts deeper than any argument or confrontation ever could. It's not just about winning or losing, it's about exposing the imbalance. Nothing highlights desperation and immaturity faster than one-sided obsession. They are trapped in their own minds, consumed by thoughts of how to outmaneuver someone who stopped playing the game entirely. Their fixation becomes their own punishment, a constant reminder that they invested energy, time, and emotion into someone who refused to respond. Your detachment didn't just free you, it amplified their exposure. The more obsessed they become, the more obvious their folly. Every glance, every calculation, every comparison they make is another confirmation that they are trapped in their own making. Meanwhile, you move freely, untouched and unaffected, showing that the only thing they truly mastered was their own unnecessary fixation. The contrast between their obsession and your liberation is not just humiliating, it's undeniable, and it leaves them looking, in the clearest terms, completely irrational and foolish. Number 11. They learned too late that your value was never up for auction. They spent so much time assuming they could control you with approval, favors, gifts, or influence, thinking that your loyalty, attention, or energy could be purchased. Every offer, every attempt to entice or manipulate was intended to make you bend, comply, or conform. They believed that by dangling rewards or wielding connections, they could turn you into a pawn, a commodity, or a reflection of their own ego. But they failed to realize that your value was never something that could be negotiated or traded. By refusing to be bought, you exposed a truth they couldn't handle. Their so-called power was built entirely on illusions. Approval is meaningless when it's offered as a bribe. Resources are irrelevant when the recipient doesn't need them. Relationships carry no weight when they're used as tools for control. Every bargaining chip they held, every tactic they thought would influence you turned out to be empty. Your independence rendered their efforts not just useless, but absurd. The bitterest part for them is that they never had leverage in the first place. They thought they were negotiating, persuading, and dominating, when in reality they were chasing shadows. All their strategies, their plotting, their attempts at persuasion revealed only their own desperation and lack of insight. And the more they tried to manipulate, the more visible it became to everyone around them that they were grasping at control that never existed. This realization leaves them exposed in the most humiliating way possible. They assumed they could corner someone who couldn't be cornered, that they could assign value to a person who defines their own worth. They imagined themselves as the architects of influence and power, only to discover that the person they were trying to move had never been inside the confines of their expectations. You didn't need to argue, prove yourself, or assert dominance. By simply refusing to participate in their transactional mindset, you highlighted the emptiness of their tactics. Their illusions of control shattered against the unshakable reality of your independence. And now they are left bitter, frustrated and humiliated, forced to confront that they never had the leverage they thought they did. Your value was never up for sale, and the realization that they mistook it for a commodity is a wound that no manipulation can heal. Number 12. You became the example. They secretly resent but publicly imitate. They look at you and hate themselves a little for it. Not because you did anything to them, not because you tried to prove yourself, but because your presence exposes the gaps in their own lives, that independence, that calm authority, that refusal to bend to their games. They secretly crave it. They admire it in ways they'll never admit, and yet in public they deride it as arrogance or selfishness. Every time they try to diminish you, it's really a reflection of their own insecurity. What makes it worse for them is that they can't simply replicate it. They try in private to mimic your confidence, your composure, your detachment, but it comes out forced, hollow and obvious. Imitation is a pale shadow of authenticity, and authenticity is something you embody without effort. Every step you take, every choice you make, every moment of calm decisiveness highlights how staged their attempts are. Their public